Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brad Hubbard with ECI Mark Systems. I wanted to try something new for our LinkedIn user group this week. Instead of just having kind of words on the screen, I thought it might be nice to kind of come to you in multimedia. Aren't you lucky? Anyway, one of the things that we strive to do here at Mark Systems is to build better builders. It's really part of who we are and really what we do. One of the ways we do that, and one of the ways I suggest doing it, is to kind of always keep your eyes and ears out there, looking for kind of the newest, latest, and greatest information, just information that's good to always brush up on. You're never too good to learn something new. So I'm always on the lookout for things like this that might be helpful to our clients. And this week, I happened onto a brand new podcast that's all about new construction marketing. And I thought this was the perfect thing to share with our users. I reached out to the podcaster, Anya Chrisanthon, and she was gracious enough to join me for my first attempt at video here. So we'll keep our fingers crossed everything goes okay as well. So anyway, we recorded this interview, and I just thought it might be nice to kind of keep these interviews short whenever I have them, just enough that you get information, you know a little bit about the product and the person that I've come across, and just enough for you to go out, check it out for yourself, and hopefully learn something along the way. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the interview here. We'll get a chance to play it. At the end, I'll leave a link to Anya's website and podcast. You'll be able to find it real easily. And hopefully you like this format. Please leave some comments if there's an idea or even a subject that you'd like to be covered maybe in the future, and or a product that you see that you think just the world has to know about. So thanks again for listening here today. Let's see how this interview goes. Okay, everybody, I am here with Anya Chrisanthon with New Construction Marketing Podcast. Do I have that right, Anya?
Yes, New Construction Marketing Podcast. You got it.
Great. Thank you for joining me here on my first ever interview for anyone, too. And you were brave enough to accept. So hopefully this will go okay. And, you won't throw anything at me as we go along, too. But anyway, I just wanted to really start off. Again, I was looking around and happened on to your new podcast. And one of the things we like to do for our Mark Systems users is kind of show them the kind of things they should be looking for, maybe new things they ought to be on the lookout for too, because all of a sudden you join in, and then as your podcast continues to grow and continues to have more information, I think folks want to latch on quick. So again, I told you ahead of time, I've spent 24 years in the home building business. So I thought we'd have you tell a little bit about yourself, your background, and why kind of an old dog like me should say, well, what do you know about marketing that, someone like me wouldn't know? And believe me, that's easy to come across. So go ahead, just tell us a little about yourself and your experience.
Sure, I'll be glad to. And thanks so much for having me on here. It's such an honor. So my background, let's see, how deep do you want to go? How far? So it all started back in the motherland. So originally I'm from Russia.
Is that right? So that's not a Southern accent, huh?
No, not a Southern accent. Okay. It's the many layers of been here in the U.S. for 22 years accent. So when I have a drink, though, it really comes out like a true. But anyway, so up until I was 13, I grew up in Russia, and my father is a scientist, so he's always traveled back and forth to U.S. and other foreign countries, collaborating with different universities. And then once Soviet Union collapsed, he then decided to move our family permanently over to U.S. And so I think that early years really it certainly had shaped me as a person, right? So looking back, it seems all very shocking, the experiences that I've been through, but living in it at the moment seemed completely normal because you don't know any different. Sure. So if you don't know any different, it doesn't seem weird to you that you go to the store and there's no food on the shelves. Yeah. And that I remember, like, specifically, my brother had a birthday party and we had chicken, and I remember being excited about eating chicken.
Is that right?
and I just had chicken for lunch. So
hey, there you go.
hey for chicken. But that just goes to show you how scarce food was. And, we had to have a garden in order to have fresh fruits and vegetables. So I can't say that I was truly hungry, but certainly malnourished, I guess, in a way that I know I definitely didn't get all my vitamins and whatever else. But, looking back at that experience, like now I tell my kids, like I tell them those stories, I walked to school and back barefooted and, in a foot of snow, and it's all true, yep. So, but I think that experience really gave me perspective of what I never want for my children, what I never want. I never want to feel, and it's not that I felt scarcity. I never felt scarcity because I didn't know. If you don't know anything different, you can't feel scarcity. But now looking back at it, I realized how poor we were, and just, we didn't have anything, but we were perfectly happy. So, so then that definitely, I think, has a lot to do with my internal drive. My desire to succeed coming from that experience. So, so then fast forward to when I was 13, and my father actually made a move to shift everyone over to US permanently. That was another traumatic experience, you could say. When you're 13 years old, your whole life, your friends.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Your parents.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So now those parents take you away from everything you know and love to another country. And, I took English in school, but if you think back to your Spanish 9th grade level, I could say, hi, my name is Anya, and where's the library? So all the useful stuff that you really need to know when you're going into high school, right?
Oh yeah, important stuff.
The important stuff. So, in addition to that, it was a British English that they taught us, so not American English. So I was so scared to even say what I knew because the accent was so different that it took me quite a while. And I think they say it's equivalent of taking a polar bear plunge.
Okay.
Where you're completely paralyzed by it's like a shock to your system. So it definitely was shocking to move to another country and not really speak the language. And the closest experience I remember specifically sitting in my biology 10th grade class, and they were teaching us about chromosomes. And I remember specifically thinking to myself, I can't even carry a conversation with my, student next to me about, hi, how was my weekend? And here I am sitting learning about chromosomes. And so I don't even know, to be honest with you, how I got through the first year. It was definitely a lot of tears, a lot of frustrations, but at that young age, you also adapt very easily. So within a year, I was fluent. And that experience, I remember one day I was sitting in a classroom, and I remember thinking that I can understand every single word being said.
Wow.
And it actually made me feel uncomfortable. So I was hooked on being uncomfortable, that it gave me some kind of almost like a junkie, adrenaline rush to
Sure.
Because, you're the only time you're really truly learning is when you're uncomfortable, right? If you're comfortable, that means you're in that status quo and you're not really progressing. So I got hooked on it. And so I definitely remember that feeling of okay, what, how can this be? Now I understand what's going on around me, and yet I am uncomfortable now. So, but I think that experience really truly shaped me for sales, because in the sales role, you have to be kind of a chameleon, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You have to be able to adjust and adapt, and you're going from one community to another community, talking to different people. So that really, I think, shaped me for that role. When I moved to the States, I ended up moving to State College, Pennsylvania. That's where Penn State University is.
Yeah, very familiar with that.
Yep. So I ended up graduating from Penn State. Really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life at that point. I was just kind of finally starting to figure out, okay, here I am. I'm finally comfortable, but I really don't know what it is that I want to do when I grow up. So I met my husband at Penn State as well, and he convinced me to move over to Philadelphia area to follow him after graduation. And so I ended up working at a big finance company, Vanguard, and loved my job there. Never thought I'd be in finance, but I ended up traveling all over the country. And my role was to educate participants in a 401k plan and a retirement plan about their options and how to invest and all this and that. So I was spending a lot of time in front of large audiences, basically doing public speaking education.
Nice.
And I really got hooked on it. It wasn't the finance part, but it was the part where somebody can come up to you afterwards and you can see the light bulb going off in their head. Like, I get it. Like, I never understood it and I finally get it. So
I need to have you tell me sometime because I still don't get it. That's in my head. I just know the money goes somewhere and hopefully it'll be there whenever
Exactly. So, but I, that was my kind of like first experience being an educator, and I really enjoyed that role. And definitely kind of fast forward to now, I'm trying to get back into that. So to make a long story short, I ended up having, my husband and I had twin boys in 2011. Okay. And so the whole traveling thing had to come to a screeching halt. And I had to take a cubicle job and I hated my life. Like I was just like, oh my God, I'm not made for this. Like I can't sit in a cubicle. I cannot take this. Like this is not, there's gotta be a better way. Sure. And a friend of mine was working for Ryan Homes at the time. And she said, listen, you'd be perfect for this. So, one thing led to another and I ended up working for Ryan Homes and been in the new construction industry now for about 6 years. So you definitely have a few years on me in that, just a little bit. Yeah. But, so I've had experience working kind of for a big national builder, and now I switched to be a little bit closer to home to work for a smaller custom builder. The trouble was that I had to travel a lot for Ryan to, some of the sites are an hour away. Sure. And so that's actually how I got hooked on podcasting, is because driving all this time, I was like, oh my gosh, like what can I do with my time? Because I was like having major road rage. And then when I discovered podcasts, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't mind being in the car. This is actually kind of cool. I could, if the guy goes in front of me, that means I can get to listen to the end of this podcast episode and it's not so bad. So
yeah, I had an hour commute for one way each way for about 10 years. So I know that traveling part too, and trying to find something to do in there too. So now for Ryan, what exactly did you do? Did you do sales for them that you did?
Yes. Exactly. So I did sales. So I know, great company. That's where I really got all of my sales training. Even though I was doing sales before, I never really got formally trained. So that was one great thing about that company, is that I really dedicate the time and the efforts to really educate their sales reps. So
good. Well, you certainly had that experience in terms of the sales. You started listening to the podcast, so I'm guessing you just thought, hey, it's time to jump in, be uncomfortable, start a podcast, I guess. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what was, and I guess you were probably getting to that, but what made you make the shift to saying, well, instead of listening, I have to share some knowledge I have too?
Sure. So, to be honest with you, I was looking for something like that. I was looking for a podcast for new construction sales reps, and I couldn't really find anything out there. There's really nothing out there. And any podcasts that I found that were specifically for real estate, they are very much from a male perspective. So it's kind of funny because if you look at, especially new construction industry as a whole, it is heavily female, right? Like, any model you walk into, 99% of the time, it's going to be a female representative there. And here, there were this podcast from a male perspective, and nothing wrong with it, but I was just not, I couldn't relate, I couldn't, it's great material, but I felt like it was like a boys club talking to a boys club, and I really wanted a girls club. Okay. So, and not to say I'm excluding the boys in my podcast, but I think I'm very clear on who my ideal customer is. And when I picture her, it's definitely a her.
Okay.
So, so that's, I guess, part of why I wanted to create that podcast. And then, you know what, another reason is, it's sometimes being a sales rep, you feel like you're sitting on an island by yourself, especially if you get stuck with something. You feel alone until you get to that sales meeting and there's a big hurrah. And, then you're like, okay, let's go do this. So my goal is to really kind of create that community of sales reps where we can all come together, we can share ideas, we can figure out what's working. How were you able to overcome this with this particular customer? Hey, try this. I've just tried this in my new open house and it really brought me a lot of success. Okay, great. I'm opening a new community. Hey, this is what I did in my last open. It really worked well for me. So I wanted to create that kind of a community where we can all hurrah and lift each other up when you're feeling down, and really spread the awareness, educate. Because again, I think it does go back to being uncomfortable, but that's when the growth happens. That's when the growth takes place. And hopefully I can provide that for somebody else.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I jumped over to your website and I saw you do more than just the podcast. You have some posts in there too. And I said, boy, you're becoming all ready. And I know your goal there, but I said, you look like you're total multimedia maven already. So maybe the next Oprah or something on that. I'm sure you never know as you start out.
Taking over.
There we got it. So just remember me when you get big out there as well. And you can remember me on that too. Now where's the best place for folks to kind of find your podcast or your site itself? I'm going to put a link, I know, to your main site, but do they have to go to your main site, or let's talk podcast first?
So if you're in iTunes, you can just search for New Construction Marketing Podcast, and that will come up. On Stitcher, same thing. You can listen directly on my website, and it's anyachrisanthon.com. And so you can access all the information on there. And yeah, to your point, the reason why I wanted to kind of create that multimedia, not just a podcast, is because for me, it is all about audio. I love listening to audiobooks. Like I say, I'm an avid reader. When I say reader, I do air quotes because I read about, a book a week probably, but I don't physically read. I don't remember was the last time I picked up a book and I read a book, just because with my lifestyle, I don't have the time. So it's all happening on the road while I'm getting ready, etc. So same thing with a podcast, it's the easiest way for me to absorb the information, but I know for somebody else, apparently people still read blog posts. So, and also I realized that blog posts are great for SEO. So, if you want to be found, you need to have blog posts out there. So I think it's kind of both strategic as well as catering to that other audience who are enjoying reading. And one thing I know is I need to get more into video as well. So I think most of us are super uncomfortable being on video.
Yeah.
But, it seems to be the future, or at least the Facebook seems to be telling us that. So, So that's one area where I'm definitely going to be getting some more content out.
Well, good. I'm happy to get you some first video exposure.
Yes, you're going to be my first. So
that sounds great too. And what I'll do is in the post that we have here, maybe in the comments, I'll also have a link to your website too. So
awesome. I appreciate that.
Oh, not a problem. Again, so thankful you can come here too. Now, the one thing I do have to ask, because I've tried a couple blogs myself, and can say I have not been too consistent. Probably on my one kind of hobby cycling blog, I did my best, but it's tough, and doing content week after week is tough. And I see you looks like it's dedicated to doing kind of a podcast each week. So I just kind of say, how do you stay motivated or find new ideas, or how do you come up with what you're going to do next? And I'm just kind of curious on that.
Sure. Great question. So, I mean, I think because the podcast is still a baby stage, My goal is to not disappoint my audience, honestly. Like I set it up as a weekly podcast because I think for me right now in where I am, it is doable to do a weekly podcast. And I'm trying to kind of get ahead of my schedule and have several podcasts recorded out, ready to get out there. But it's really, I think, training your audience in a way that they know what to expect from you. And so if they're tuning in every Tuesday to listen to my podcast, and then suddenly, they're ready for that podcast and it's not there, it's like you're letting them down. And I guess I don't want to disappoint somebody. I'm definitely dedicated to this and providing as much value as I possibly can through, my personal knowledge, but as well as bringing other guests from the industry to help bring the awareness. And so I think it's twofold. It's the training your audience to expect it, and on my part, staying accountable to really come through. And as far as inspiration goes, there's no shortage of it. I'm in the industry myself, so I know my ideal customer, right? I know what they're looking for because I am my ideal customer, right? Because I'm living through it. I'm living through the pain points, and really those are the pain points that I'm trying to address. So I'm trying to seek out guests who can answer the questions for me, who I can learn from.
Great. And you have, again, it's a pretty young podcast already, but you've already kind of landed some big names down there. I think Kim Mackey is one. She's with is it New Home Solutions? I think you already got her. So that's fantastic. So it's wonderful you continue to look for new guests there.
Yeah, she's been absolutely phenomenal. It's like she's one of those human beings that's just so positive and so giving, and she's just been a biggest supporter, and I'm just so grateful for that.
Good. And I connected with her on LinkedIn after hearing her on your podcast too, and told her that's how I found her. So she also expressed that she's excited for you and is there to support you. So I think that's fantastic too. So so if you had your pick of your dream guest right now, that you could have anybody, I was just kind of curious, who would that, other than me, of course, but I guess I'm not really on your podcast. I haven't made it that far yet, but who would it be if you had to guess, and then maybe we'll get the word out. Maybe some of our users know the person.
Oh boy. There's so many great people out there that I definitely have in my mind. And I think the person that I most idolize when it comes to sales specifically is Grant Cardone.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Can't say I am yet. Grant, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I'll look you up.
Grant is the godfather of sales, as we call him. So he's just one of those guys that he came from nothing and amassed this great empire now. And his whole thing was sales training. So, and I liked his approach because he's very he's all about being ethical, but very straightforward. So he's kind of like, cut the BS. Let's get to the bottom of this. And he just gives you that inspiration and that push. He's not all about that woo-woo stuff. He's really straightforward. Like, okay, if you think you need to accomplish A in order to get there, you probably need to 10x that in order to actually accomplish that goal, because what you think it's going to take, it's going to take much more. And I think especially in this generation of a lot of millennials now think like, oh, I'm going to be the next YouTube star, this and that, I'm going to become rich overnight just by doing nothing. And he actually puts in the work, and he says, hey, you know what, it's going to take a lot more than you think. And that's why a lot of people, there's not more successful people, right? Because there's a lot of dreamers, but not doers. And so that's what I admire about him, is that he's definitely a doer. He's putting in the work. He's out there every single day. And if I can aspire one day to be a baby Grant Cardone for the new construction sales, I would definitely love that. So.
All right. Well, there you go for any of our users
so,
out there.
Grant, if you're listening.
That's right.
Or if anybody knows Grant,
there we go.
I'll definitely be reaching out. So, I figured, I don't know if he'd agree to be on a new podcast yet, but you know what? You never know.
They started somewhere too, so they, a lot of times they do. So you never know.
Exactly.
Now, do you update then each Tuesday? You mentioned before about each Tuesday, or is it a certain day or a certain time?
Yeah, so Tuesdays at 6 a.m. is when it comes out.
Okay.
So every Tuesday you'll hear from a new guest, and typically, like I said, I try to make it either somebody directly from the industry. Sometimes I'll feature some sales reps who are having particular success. And then I think I'll probably have some solo podcasts as well, kind of more of a educational sessions on what's working. And so we'll go from there, and hopefully as people listen more and more, I'll get some ideas directly from them of what they want to hear about, and go from there.
Well, that's nice too, and I think I can tell even just from talking to you here too that you're one of those also believes in being real in there too. The good and the bad. You hear a lot about that in content. Is people can spot phonies. So if you're out there and being who you are and being real and saying, hey, not every day is going to be a great day, and this is how you get over that. And I think that's fantastic too. So
definitely.
Well, good. Let's remind everybody where, again, you can find the podcast on, you said on
AnyaChrisanthon.com/iTunes, or you can do /Stitcher, /Google Play, whatever you're listening on, or if you just, search in iTunes for New Construction Marketing Podcast, it'll come up as well. So definitely check it out. And if you guys can let your teams know, anybody who could benefit from it, I'd certainly appreciate that.
Okay, great. Well, hey, I want to thank you for your time today, and look forward to following along as your podcast grows. And like I said, maybe one day when you're, you're the Oprah or the Grant Cardone of new home sales, you'll remember and come back and see us again too.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and best of luck as well.
Thank you very much.